Hey Jamie, we're gonna take a look at your final project here. I'm gonna go with the one that you had posted, the last one. I posted one from the one that you emailed me, and I made adjustments to it in terms of the coloring and the contrast a little bit. But I feel like this one's a little bit clearer, other than kind of a blurrier area, although it's wildly too large. But the other ones, way too blurry on the right side and up above. It's really unusable. The other one was a little too overexposed. I think this actually works better. I like the cropping that's going on here, whether intentional or not. I feel like the house gets a little bit lost when you have this much sky overhead, and I think the clouds being as active as they are, there's a lot of kind of marker work being done, a lot of mark making being done. The sky, the coverage in the sky itself it's very kind of uneven. So I think when you lessen that, the house tends to take more of a center stage. You definitely lose a lot of the back house, the wooden house, and you miss out on some of the detail, like the mountain and the mountain on the side, and there isn't as much detail like on the helipad and stuff. But I think the color is represented a little bit better. It's a lot cleaner in terms of the clarity. And again, I think the composition is nice in that it feels a little bit off center. The sky doesn't take as much prominence, and the house gets to kind of show off a little bit more. I think the one thing that surprises me the most from this, from the last versions that we saw, was how well things integrate together. I think before I did not have a clear idea of how the different buildings were going to integrate in terms spatially, proportion-wise, how they connect, and I think it works a little bit better now. Definitely the glass structure on the right and the house itself definitely feel a lot better and feel like they actually are working together. I'm not so sure about the house in the back. It does still feel a little bit out of place. The texture doesn't feel quite as convincing as it could. There's not really very much value. There's no cast shadows, so it doesn't convince quite as much as the other two do. It doesn't have any doors, doesn't have any windows either. So these are kind of things that it just feels like kind of a back house that, if it was not in place, I don't think I'd actually, I don't think it would be a huge loss. I think these two work out, well together, and and the helipad actually works out well. A lot of this comes down to the perspective, which I feel is working out pretty good overall. The proportions and the size of things feel very good. There's some minor kind of detail issues, like the windows feeling like they're leaning to the right a little bit, and they could be a little straighter vertically. The helipad feels a little wobbly in both cases, especially with that ellipse within the square. But I'd say overall the perspective feels good, especially the road, which feels very convincing, and the buildings themselves, which feel very convincing. I think the detail is good. Like I said, the proportions feel a lot better than they have before. I definitely would like to have seen a little bit more value work, a little bit more cast shadow work being done. I can get a sense that there's a very small amount of cast shadow in place, but it just doesn't come out at me, I think, as strongly or prominently as it could. I also think texture work, and this is probably due to the fact that I think there's two kind of things here, that due to the fact that I think you just had to rush through the first couple of weeks, and I think that's really where you get a lot of that, the kind of the groundwork to a lot of these marker renderings. So the texture work doesn't feel quite as convincing, which was a week 2 thing, and technique in general feels still a little bit on the rough side, a little bit inconsistent, a little bit uneven. We see it in the clouds, we definitely see it in the sky, we see it to a certain extent in the ground plane, although you can kind of get away with it because it kind of feels like grass, but it's still very uneven, especially on the bottom right corner. And these are kind of issues that, especially when it was a wider sky, I think were more of a distraction, but not so much kind of in this one. But I think what you have is still a really nicely integrated kind of rendering. There's some good marker work in place, and a lot of nice kind of details that I think are fitting together, really